If you ask an anime fan to talk about the defining movies of the medium, it's only a matter of time before Katsuhiro Otomo's Akira comes up. Released in 1988, this cyberpunk masterpiece tells the story of best friends Kaneda and Tetsuo, two members of a motorcycle gang known as the Capsules. When I first saw Akira as a kid, the Capsules were the coolest thing I'd ever seen, though what I didn't realise at the time was that real biker gangs made up of teenagers were actually widespread in Japan when the film was made, and recent reports actually suggest that Japan's biker gangs might be making a comeback. Known as Bōsōzoku, which roughly translates as violent speed tribes, this youth subculture was at its height in the 1980s, with over 40,000 members in various gangs across the country. They would form massive convoys and drive around on customised bikes, wielding baseball bats and just daring the police to try and stop them. Just like in the opening scene of Akira, there were often clashes between rival gangs that sometimes led to serious injury and even death. Membership began to decline in the 1990s, but there's been a recent spike in interest thanks in part to the popularity of Tokyo Revengers, a manga series turned anime written by former gang member Ken Wakue. In 2019, a new gang was founded in Ebina, a city in Kanagawa Prefecture about 40 minutes from Tokyo. At the time, the leader was quoted as saying, "We formed so that nobody else could run wild in Ebina." According to Fuji News Network, the gang quickly became a nuisance for police, trailing patrol cars and teasing officers with their dangerous driving. Nobody really took them that seriously at first, but in January 2024, a man was assaulted and robbed at around 2 AM on the streets of Ebina. The 37-year-old victim was walking home when he was suddenly surrounded by a gang of bikers who proceeded to beat him up and steal his phone and wallet. His injuries weren't life-threatening, but they were bad enough that he needed hospital treatment. This unprovoked attack made national headlines and reopened the discussion about Bōsōzoku gangs. People began sharing their own experiences with young biker gangs, suggesting that they're very much aware that they will not be jailed because of their age. Some started criticising the police for not doing more, and others suggested that connections to the Yakuza keep them safe from any real consequences. This isn't just a thing in Ebina either, with recent incidents also taking place in Yokohama, a port city to the south of Tokyo. In 2022, 3 gang members on stolen motorcycles led the police on a chase around the city. One member of the group, who was just 15 at the time, sprayed a fire extinguisher at the windscreens of the pursuing police cars to obscure the views of the officers trying to stop them. Speaking after their eventual capture, one of the bikers laughed about the incident, saying, "We liked spraying the fire extinguisher and causing the police trouble so they couldn't catch us." Incidents involving teenagers on motorbikes and scooters have also taken place in Tokyo itself. A massive group was seen driving around Shibuya in June 2023, turning the heads of locals and tourists alike as they passed over the district's famous crossing. There's a general perception that teens on scooters aren't really Bōsōzoku and that they don't pose much of a threat to anyone. Though, in November 2023, 3 youngsters on scooters raided a precious metal store in Tokyo's Ueno district, or at least they tried to. 2 of them used crowbars to smash the store's glass cases, but before they could actually steal anything, an employee came at them with a sasumata, a pole weapon used by samurai to capture people alive in feudal Japan. Footage of 2 of the thieves fleeing the shop and colliding with an accomplice on the way out went viral, with people praising the employee for his quick thinking and bravery. A second employee also acted to stop the would-be robbers, kicking over their scooters to slow their getaway, and then picking up a traffic cone to use as a weapon. Stunned by the resistance put up by the shop workers, the teens ran off down the street, leaving their vehicles behind in their panic. Knowing the scooters would be used to trace them, 2 of the riders involved, both aged 18, handed themselves in to police in Saitama Prefecture. Nobody got hurt and it was all quite comical in the end, but as Japan Today pointed out in its report, the frequency of these incidents was becoming a cause for concern. They said, "This was the latest in an alarming increase in smash-and-grab robberies targeting luxury goods shops in Tokyo over the past year. Nearly half a dozen have taken place so far this year in this particular part of Ueno, which has a cluster of jewellery and high-end watch shops." Of course, most young bikers aren't going around mugging people and robbing fancy stores, but that doesn't mean they aren't becoming more of a nuisance. While some dismiss them as just a bunch of kids acting out, others still think of them more like Yakuza in training. The Bōsōzoku gang's Chinese Dragon and Kanto Rengo have been classified as pseudo-Yakuza groups by Japan's National Police Agency for the past decade, a term that the authorities believe better suits their criminal activities. Chinese Dragon has become particularly troublesome for the police, with various factions of the gang even clashing with each other on occasion. In October 2022, a mass brawl broke out at a fancy French restaurant on the 58th floor of the Sunshine City building in Tokyo's Ikebukuro district. Chinese Dragon's Akabane faction had rented a section of the restaurant to celebrate the release of one of its leaders from prison, with approximately 100 members in attendance. Things got violent when around 70 uninvited men from the gang's Ueno faction suddenly showed up, leading to a huge fight that saw plates and bottles thrown. The head of the Ueno faction, a Chinese national named Jiang Haifeng, was later arrested along with 4 others. Chinese Dragon is mainly made up of second and third generation descendants of Japanese orphans who were left behind in China when Japan withdrew from the country at the end of World War II. Many other gangs were founded by young Japanese pilots who found it hard to adjust to normal life when the Second World War came to an end. The movement began in earnest in the 1950s when Japan was still occupied by American forces. As such, these early gangs were influenced by American greaser culture, meaning most of them wore lots of denim and rocked pompadour hairstyles. Over the decades, Bōsōzoku gangs began to develop their own unique style. Many wore surgical masks and tall boots with boiler suits like those used by manual labourers, usually adorned with various slogans and logos. These uniforms became known as tokofuku, which roughly translates as special attack clothing. Speaking to the Japan Times in 2019, members of a recently disbanded Bōsōzoku gang explained why these uniforms were so important to them.
の気持ちの違いというか、どういう意味があるのか教えてください。
そうですね、特攻服着て走ることによってやっぱり一番僕が思ってたのはもう自分のアピールですか、もう俺はこれだっていう信念持って俺はこれでやってるんだっていうのを一緒に見てもらいたいっていうか一緒に見せつけてオラオラみたいなそういうのがすごい欲しくて僕は特攻服着て走ってました。
Essentially, wearing these uniforms not only marks you as a member of a motorcycle gang, it signals to the rest of the world that you're an outsider, someone who wants to fight against Japan's rigid societal norms. This is exactly what drew Otomo to the idea of making a manga about characters from a Bōsōzoku gang.
あんまりね、社会に参加してない人間を主人公にしたかったんでね。そういう社会の中に入っていない、または出てしまった人間たちの方がやっぱ書いてて面白いっていうのはありますけどね。
Of course, Otomo wasn't the only Japanese filmmaker who tackled the subject of biker gangs in the 1980s. A bunch of live-action biker movies were released at the time, the most famous of which is probably Sogo Ishii's Crazy Thunder Road. Once dubbed Japan's answer to Mad Max, this cult classic follows a young biker called Jin, who forms a splinter group called Kamikaze when the leader of his gang decides to clean up his act. Jin wages a violent war against rival gangs and the authorities trying to clamp down on his activities. What's interesting about Crazy Thunder Road is that the director actually used real gang members as extras. He said, "We had no choice. I would go to these biker gatherings to recruit them to be in the film with their bikes as extras because we didn't have any bikes ourselves." Jin ends up going totally off the rails as his former gangmates abandon the lifestyle in favour of a regular adult life, eventually meeting a violent end. It's not a particularly hopeful story, though not every Bōsōzoku film from the time was a cautionary tale. 1986's His Motorbike, Her Island has been praised as one of the few films that shines a positive light on the subculture. It's the tale of a youngster named Ko, who views his bike more as a key to freedom than a tool for anarchy. It does have its violent moments, but it's ultimately a love story that blends biker action with some stunning shots of Japan's countryside. Both of these films became popular enough that they received releases outside of Japan in the years that followed, but neither has ever come close to the level of Akira in terms of impact, and the reason for that is quite simple. Akira is absolutely flawless. It's not just the painstaking attention to detail that went into making the film, it's that Otomo strikes the perfect balance between demonizing and sympathizing with his young protagonists. He definitely doesn't paint them as anti-heroes in the traditional sense, but at the same time, he makes it clear that Kaneda, Tetsuo, and the rest of the capsules are what they are because the adults in their lives continually let them down. Kaneda and Tetsuo were both brought up in an orphanage, not because they didn't have parents, but because their parents were unfit to care for them. They're all treated like dirt at the reform school they're forced to attend, getting neglected and beaten to the point that they're literally spitting blood in Kai's case. Pretty much every authority figure in the story abuses their power, a theme that runs through both the manga and the movie. According to the 1976 documentary film Godspeed You, Black Emperor, which follows the notorious Tokyo-based Bōsōzoku gang Black Emperor, most new recruits to the gang came from the same kind of circumstances as Kaneda and Tetsuo. The parts of the documentary that show the gang in action are fascinating, but what's arguably more interesting is seeing these teens in their downtime. In one memorable scene, there's a mass gathering of new members who start to open up about their lives. One of them says, "I've never been to school," while another reveals, "I live in a tunnel. No home." Black Emperor is the gang that Tokyo Revengers creator Ken Wakue was supposedly a member of. It was disbanded in the 1990s, but it's not like these unfortunate kids just stopped existing as a result. Japan still has a problem with homeless and runaway kids, who regularly gather in Tokyo's Kabukicho district, next to the Toho cinema. Teenagers come from all over the country to meet with people in similar situations, and the numbers are getting so high that authorities are now considering building temporary shelters in the area to keep them safe and hopefully stop them from turning to crime. There's been confirmed gang activity in the area, with one known gang member and several others being arrested in October 2023 after a big fight broke out. Under the circumstances, it's not hard to see why the idea of gang life might appeal to some of these runaway kids. Bōsōzoku culture puts a lot of emphasis on camaraderie, and what a lot of these young people are craving is a sense of belonging. Creating shelters for vulnerable teens is a noble idea, though the authorities might be better off trying to address the root of the problem. But I digress. Let's answer the questions that this video set out to tackle. Are Bōsōzoku gangs making a comeback in Japan? Well, the truth is, they never really left, but they're very different now compared to what they were like in their heyday. The reason the number of gang members declined so rapidly is that new, stricter laws were passed that made it far more risky to take part in this kind of activity. This, on top of advances in surveillance technology, meant that being affiliated with a known gang just wasn't worth it. Young, rebellious bikers have learned to adapt to this new climate, pushing boundaries just hard enough to annoy the establishment, but not quite hard enough that the police are going to crack down on them. Now, reports have confirmed that the attempted raid on the precious metal shop in Ueno was part of a spate of similar incidents in the area. So yes, technically this could be classed as a crime wave. But does that mean that Tokyo is getting more dangerous? Absolutely not. This idea that Japan is a totally safe country has always been a fallacy, but comparatively speaking, it is a very safe place to be, especially for visitors. If you live there, then you're far more likely to be impacted by the behaviour of these modern Bōsōzoku gangs, which is mainly limited to riding noisy, modified bikes and scooters through residential areas, ignoring traffic lights, and zigzagging dangerously through traffic. Now, the police will of course take action against this kind of behaviour when it happens en masse. For example, in 2020, 56 bikers were arrested at a Bōsōzoku revival event in Osaka, a mixture of high school students and young part-time workers. However, when it's just a small group of kids messing around on their bikes, most police officers won't bother getting involved. If they chase them, that only increases the risk of an accident, and many people are of the opinion that today's Bōsōzoku are just trying to blow off steam like we all did in one way or another at that age. It's like Otomo said.
それは俺たちもそうだったみたいに、今の若い奴らも自分で探さなきゃいけないんじゃないですか。俺たちが何か言うことじゃないですよ。俺たちが何言ったって誰も聞かないしね、どうせね。そんなもんじゃないですかね。
Thanks for watching everyone, and let me know what you think in the comments. Are Japan's modern biker gangs a cause for concern, or are they just a bunch of bored kids and wannabes? Also, if you have any Bōsōzoku movie recommendations, I'd love to hear them. Crazy Thunder Road is absolutely my jam, so if you know of anything similar that I need to watch, go ahead and drop it in the comments. Cheers guys, I'll see you in the next one.